Running a business comes with constant learning, and that's where the Business Blend comes in. Every month we bring local entrepreneurs together for a quick, practical talk on a business topic that matters, followed by a time to connect and share ideas. It's a simple way to stay sharp and build a stronger community.
All right, thank you for coming. I don't know how awesome of a business owner I am, but I am a business owner. I'll just give you a little bit of introduction to who I am. It's kind of going to be a potpourri of different things over the years. We're going to talk about culture, and everyone comes with different ideas of what culture looks like, what it is. Sometimes we don't even think about it. Most of the time, we don't think about it. And I titled this, "The Culture That We Underestimate May Be Costing Us." What I want to suggest that it is actually costing everyone, not just us as business owners or us as leading a team or so have you. One of the things that I found over the years was you come into a place, and if you're familiar with it, you're okay with it. But if you're new, just like you come into a building here and you have no idea where to go, you might feel that kind of confusion or something. And that happens where you can go to a business where if you're running a business, it might be normal to you, but you don't know what it's like for that person that just comes to the place. My background, after college, I started working for a city over on the west side, and I was a public works department. And my first day, when I got hired, I was gonna wash cars, so not a very important person. I got introduced to the public works director, and the person introduced me and said, "Hey, this is a new guy that's gonna be working in our shop to take care of stuff and wash cars." The guy never even looked up from his desk. He just said, "Oh, hi." Never looked at me. And that was my first job I had after college. And I was like, wow, okay, this is how this is gonna go. I just did my job. I worked really hard, ended up getting promoted, got my certification in drinking water from the Department of Health and managing water systems there. By the time that I ended, 4 years later, from that time there, that experience, that same public works director needed some help at home on his computer. And so he invited me over. I was super nervous because this person, the way that they were at work, was very like, he would come in with his presence and everyone's just like, "Oh no, he's here, he's here." Like, there's just this kind of fear and dread. And he would not, when he would make a decision, that was it. There was no discussion. That's just how he ran things. When I got to his home, I had no idea what to expect. I got there, he sat me down, he served me tea. He was actually from the Middle East, and so there was a Middle Eastern culture that was happening there. Super friendly, very nice. He was warm. He talked about his kids and some challenges because we were going to be going overseas. Completely different person that I'd ever experienced for the 4 years prior to that. And that's a culture that happens at his home, but the way that he was presenting that at work was something entirely different. And I remember thinking, like, what would it have been like if he had actually been that way at work? And how would that have affected the entire department? Rather than like leading from like fear and control, but actually trying to empower people and feel like people are on the same team. There were some great things that I learned from Public Works Department. Another thing that I was told as well is that you just always remember there's 50 people lined up to take the job that you have. That might be true, but as an employee, that's not really empowering me to feel like I'm important or that I have a purpose for there. I'm just a number. Those are some things that we can communicate, whether we overtly say that or it just happens by the way that we treat our employees. Before I went overseas, went to Southeast Asia, to Indonesia. I got a master's degree in linguistics and culture, and the only reason I say that is just that the aspects of language and culture are intertied together. And so for me, it helped me think about things outside of what I was normally used to. It's really hard if you're in a place like most of the people that I have grown up with and my relatives have lived here their entire life. And so when you only see that aspect of it, sometimes it's hard to see like, what's happening here? This person doesn't understand me or I don't understand them. And if you look at it, there can be a lot of cultural things coming into play, especially if we have international students or people from even from other areas. I want to ask you, I run a handyman business, and we do some home repairs, remodeling, and work in commercial spaces as well. I want you to just tell me what first comes into your mind when you think of handyman.
Jerry rigs just above the homeowner.
Jerry rig just above the homeowner. That's a good one. Yeah, what else?
Jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades. There's a list of things that I've seen. Oftentimes, in people's minds, they're unprofessional. There's quality control concerns like, oh, it's good enough, nobody cares. Don't communicate well. Not very dependable and not clean, whether inside the workspace or themselves, how they dress. Not trustworthy. These are the things that for me uniquely as a handyman or as a contractor, I have to push against that stereotype, that kind of culture that people are expecting, like this is what I'm expecting when I hire someone. The positive thing for me as a business owner, that in most people's mind, that standard is really low. So we don't have to do a whole lot more for people to feel like they had a really good experience. Now, having said that, I want to raise the bar really high, but because there have been so many negative complaints, or so many complaints that there's a few things that we can do that really make a big difference. I first tried this out, and I said, when I started up this company, and I said, I want to wear shoe coverings when I go into a place, regardless of who it is or whatever. It was funny because I had this conversation with my wife, and she was like, why is that? It's not really that big of a deal. And I said, yes, it is, especially here, because people wear boots and it's dirty, whatever. So I went to an apartment. It was a tenant. I put on some shoe coverings, walked in, did my work there, fixed a couple things, walked out. As I walked out, she said, thank you so much for putting on those shoe coverings, because I just feel really awkward if I have to ask people to take their shoes off or put shoe coverings on. Great, that was my first feedback, and that's the kind of culture that I want to have. I mentioned that story online to a handyman group, and one of the handyman responded and said, I don't wear shoe coverings, and especially the one that I own, the rental that I own, I'm not going to wear that, it's my own house. So his culture is like, he owns the house, doesn't matter that he's walking into a place that's actually someone's home. Maybe they don't own it, but it's their home. So these are the kind of things that are cultural in business that I'm trying to try to set up here, where people feel like we're going into their home. They're inviting us into their home. We're guests to their home, even if we're going to work and service there. That's the kind of culture that I wanted to try to create. One of the other things I just want to mention about that as a handyman is that people call me not because they want to just tell me like, hey, how are you doing? Hope you have a great day. It's because there's something wrong. There's a crisis. They're panicked. They're selling their house and they had a bad inspection report, or something broke right before somebody's birthday party, or they've just completely lost it because their spouse has never finished this thing and they just want to get it done. I've had all of those things happen. And so I see my role as like, we're involved in restoring and renewing things. And we're really coming to bring calm in a storm of crisis. That might sound a little bit heady, but for me, it's really important for me to think about that, because it helps me kind of present that culture when we go into a place. When I hire people and talk about my business, these are the things that I share with. And when you talk about it like that, you're going to find people that it connects with and other people that it's not, and they don't care. The ones that I've talked to, that I've hired and I've shared about this is what I want to do in my business, and I see them like, I want to work for you, those are the people that I want to hire. It's not so much about the skill set. The character is extremely important, but it's this connection about what's really important inside that person. And do they want to be able to like, I want to get a job here because this is something I want to be a part of. I want you just to be thinking about that in your own context. I found this quote recently, and it's from Simon Sinek. He says, the real job of a leader is not about being in charge, but it's to be caring for those in our charge. I want you just to reflect back in the different jobs that you've had, people that you've had to work for, and think about those that were leading you. Were they in charge of you? Or were they caring about who you were because you were in their charge? There's a big difference. And I just want to suggest to you that if we have our view, our role is to be caring for those people that are in our charge. It makes a huge difference with how our employees respond, not just to us, but to our customers, to our clients, to how they talk about it out on the street. It makes a big difference. I mentioned my family here. I have 4 kids. My daughter Rebecca's in the back. So she's one of my biggest critics of my business, which is great. She's currently living with us, and so I usually talk about different things that happen, and she's always giving me good feedback. And I'm sure I'll get some feedback today too. So it's good. It's really good to have those kind of close feedback. But one of the things that we got involved with overseas was working in an area where it was really impoverished, place where people had been taking advantage of each other. And one of the first things that I did was I sat down a couple people there and I said, what would you say about your own people group? This happened to be a language group, but you could do this even in a small area like Pullman. What would you say about Pullman that's maybe different than a different place? What's the culture of Pullman? So in my context, I asked them and I said, what would you say about the people, your own people? And they said, we're lazy and we can't be trusted. Those are the 2 things they said. One of the reasons for that was because they had been enslaved for centuries. They had been taken advantage of. Their history had been destroyed. They had been told that they weren't worth anything. And we would see this in business. There were business owners that were from other areas in Indonesia that would treat these people horrifically. And other people would share with me and say, like, they were treated like robots, like we're just nothing. That's the expectation of what a business is supposed to be like there. And so I said, I want to do something different. And so I made it my personal goal to say, like, I want to build a business there where we're going to show people that you're trustworthy and you're going to work hard. And I wanted to find people that wanted to actually do that. How would you define culture in business? Maybe in your own context. It's pretty simple, but how do we do things around here? What's harder is if you were to write that down. That might be harder to actually write it down, but if you were to ask somebody, especially from an outsider, describe my business to me, they'll probably say some things that you'd never thought of because they're seeing it from the outside that we just kind of expect as being normal. I'm going to read a quote from a very successful business person who employs several hundred people, not in this area. What do you want the team when you want they're away say about your company? That's culture. That's the internal reputation. And so how do you develop that? Well, it's generally going to be based on the consistent application of your values. And so you state your values, what they are, over and over and over and over to your team, and then you enforce those values. And the people that are in violation of those values continuously, as a pattern, don't get to be part of the team. And that's the culture. And we're looking for people that are going to align with those values and be on the team. And then that keeps the consistency of the culture. When you're talking about culture, it's about enforcing your values. And when people violate them, you give them a warning or they're out. Another quote from this person, was on a leadership podcast, and he was talking about gossip and gossip culture. And he said, you get one chance and you're out. Now, I don't know everything else about their company, but I can make some assumptions about what that's like there. They might be very successful. They might be very productive. I don't know about their turnover rate for their employees. I wouldn't want to work there because it's very top down. Probably don't get to give any feedback to the people that are above you because of this type of culture. So for me, I care a lot more about not just being successful, but being successful with people. Not just about how much money we can make, but what kind of impact can we actually make with the people that we're employing. So overseas, what I was sharing about this company that we started up was called ERC Austrindo. And our goal was we were making compost from a landfill, and we were going to sell that to farmers. Sounds fairly easy, and it absolutely was not. Our goal was to be able to employ people that were working on a landfill. They actually lived on the landfill, and they worked there gathering trash. and then they would try to sell the recyclables, barely surviving. And for us to be able to get access to that landfill, we had to work with the waste department there. It's very complicated. Complicated, not that what we were trying to do is complicated, but because we had to work with other people and to get all the agreements. And in this place where there's a lot of thank you gifts or incentives that you need to provide to people in order for them to give you permissions, we had decided that when we started out, we weren't going to do that. And we wanted to find people who wanted to actually want us to be there because of what we're trying to do. What we had to start to do was we came up with these 3 areas of our focus of our company. We were going to focus on people, planet, and profit. And I communicated this with the people that I had started to hire and to find people that actually find this interesting. And what I said was, we're not just here as a business to make money. Because that was in their mind was, a business takes advantage of people. That's all they do. And I had to create a completely new paradigm for them, a new culture. And I said, we're going to focus on people. We want to make sure to see how we can actually build capital, human capital, build people up so that they have the capacity not only to work, but that their families can be impacted, they can have a better society. We want to take care of our environment, and we want to make a profit. When you do one of those minus the other 2, bad things happen. If you only care about the environment, you probably aren't going to make a whole lot of money, and it might be at the expense of people. There are some people that are very, very concerned about the environment at the expense of the people that are living there. That happens. If you focus only on the people, you're probably not going to make a profit. But if you focus on the profit, you're going to have the expense of the people and the planet as well. And so we just talked about that in very simple terms. And in a way that we were able to share that with other people. This was one of the things that we tried to do as a business owner, as a business, because people had these negative views about who we were, what we were going to do. Especially me as a foreigner, I hired all nationals, all people that are local from there. But the fact that this was a foreigner that was here made it even worse. So those were the 3 things that we were having to try to present to people, but yet we still had this, we had pushback from the government, from local stakeholders, because they said, what am I going to get out of this? And so I just kept going back to the point that was, this is about the people, and this is about taking care of your land. The land that was there had been fertilized and over-fertilized so much that it was basically destroyed, and they were wasting so much money on fertilizer every year because it had been burned. And so we were trying to talk about our compost coming in to be able to help restore those fields. But more importantly for me was, how can we actually build into the people there so that whether they work for us or not, they're going to be able to learn and to experience that they're not lazy and they can be trusted. And so we had some conversations about this. And this was my first team working on the landfill. Interestingly enough, we were there. It took us a year to actually get anybody to actually try out what we were trying to do. We tried to talk with all the men that were there, and they would reject us every time. Finally, one day, somebody said, as some kids walked by, hey, why don't you just try this strange thing that this white guy's trying to get you guys to do? Because what we said was, all we want is to find a couple people. We're going to do this very simple thing. You're going to screen out this compost, and we'll pay you right there. You'll get paid immediately right when you do this thing. And it was the kids, it was high school kids, that decided to start it up. And what was really interesting was that when we started this out, the adults started to watch us over the several weeks. And they saw us paying cash when they would do the work. And all of a sudden the guys were like, can we start working for you? What's happening here? When those guys before were walking around and saying, like, don't trust these guys. They're going to take advantage of you, whatever. What they're doing right there is they're screening out waste that had been sitting there for about 10 years. And in our situation there, It was mostly organic waste. There's plastic bags and organic waste. That was what was consisted up in our landfill there. And the technology that they're doing right now was something that they would do all the time. They had to build homes and they would use cement. They had to screen out sand. And so we were trying to find what, to me, seemed at first like that's not really technology, but it actually is. It was something that they're already used to doing, and all we did was we applied it to something different. But that process of just telling people, like, do the same thing you've always done, but just do it in this way, that kind of change, if you don't get people to buy in, they're just not going to do it. So what was fun was that I had been really concerned about how to keep people accountable, how to be like, how are we going to keep people from stealing from us? How do we make sure that people are going to like actually do the work? Those were thoughts that went in my head because I thought I need to be responsible, be a good business owner. We started this work and I found out that they ended up sorting it out themselves. They figured out how to come up with the most optimized teams. There were people that were like, I'm not going to share the workload, I'm going to do it all myself. And so they tried to screen all the compost by themselves. And they watched the guy that had like 2 people, and they're doing more than they were. Then there were people that were like, oh, we'll get 5 people. They finally came up with there was 3 people. That was the optimum number to get the most compost within a short amount of time. They found that all out themselves. We didn't do any training. I didn't have to talk to them about it. And what it said back to me was, as much as I started out with this saying, like, I want to push against this idea that you guys are lazy and that you can't be trusted, I was actually communicating those things because I was trying to set up a system of accountability. It really hit me hard because I was like, I'm glad that we didn't actually set up like supervisors and things like that, because that's exactly what that would have communicated, that we can't trust you. You know, everything went great, but there were some hiccups along the way. This simple process of what we were doing was we said, you screen out the compost, you take this bucket, which you can buy anywhere in the, in their area, and you put 4.5 of those into this bag, and then we buy it from you, period. That's all done. And we pay per bag. Well, eventually we started noticing that those bags were kind of like getting lighter and smaller and smaller. And so I talked to my employee, right-hand man, Iskandar, and I said, Iskandar, what should we do? Like, we need to talk about this. And he said, let's just sit down and have a meeting with everybody. And so we did. We sat down and talked with them. And right then I knew, like, I could be like the typical business owner there, and I would shame them and tell them how terrible they were, that they're stealing from us, and that we tried to trust you and we can't trust you now, and we're going to have somebody here monitoring. But what I decided to do was to say, we need to talk about this as being a team. There's something bigger happening here. They want to make money, but we also want to be able to make money. But the people that we're selling this to, the farmers, which are their neighbors, also want to make money. And this thing is much larger than just the one job that we have. It impacts the whole area that we're at. And so I said, let's just do a random check and take out a bag and let's just count it. And we did, and we came up with like 3 buckets instead of the 4.5. And we found a whole group of those. And I didn't say anything, and all of a sudden they're like, no, he did that, no, he did that. And they're all just kind of like accusing each other. And I said, look, doesn't matter, but from now on, let's just remember it's 4.5 buckets. That's all we want. Problem solved, never had to deal with that again. But we could have done it a different way and probably would have lost the whole team. So I want to give you this random story, which might seem super random for your context, but think about it in your own context. What are ways that with your business or your team, it can actually have a greater impact than just outside of that job or that role that you're doing? This is what I'm going to keep sharing with you as we go. A few of the things that I learned over this time, and maybe this will be helpful to you as well, is like to look beyond the skill set and the character. Find the people that are going to be aligned with the values that you have. Lead with empathy. There was a time during COVID when there was a lab that was set up here, and I was a supervisor, and we employed hundreds of different people to come and build these COVID test kits. And I remember one time there was a lady that had gotten a phone call, and she was just in tears. and had found out that like her child didn't get off the bus when he was supposed to. And she was panicking. And she was terrified about asking time off because she's a temporary employee, right? This makes sense. But she was like way over the top. I mean, complete panic attack. And I say over the top only because if I had not known her story, that's what I would have thought. But because I had gotten to know her a little bit more, I had found out that she had been a mother when she was a teenager. She had had 3 children. Her own mother had said, "You will never be able to be a good mother. You will never make it as a good mother." And then all of a sudden, when this moment happened and her child didn't come off the bus and she's at work, she lost it. And people would have looked at that like, "What is wrong with you? This is Pullman. It's okay. Don't worry about it." This person was not from Pullman. And I knew that in that moment, I said, I have to speak into this and tell her, you are a good mother because you're here trying to work to provide for your kids. That's what mothers do. And they care about their kids when they don't show up at the bus stop or they don't get off the bus. That's what good mothers are. So leading with empathy, being able to know your employees. I want to say counterculture because there's a lot of this business culture where it's like, leave your home stuff at home, come and do your work. I don't want to hear about it. I want to push against that. You have a right to disagree with me. But we all bring our stuff to our workplace. We just try to hide it. Or we talk to somebody else about it. It's going to be there. So let's just try to work with it. Now, shouldn't have counseling sessions at a workplace, obviously. But for us to be able to get to know our employees a little bit and to show empathy, to be able, where they're humans just like we are. They're going to have bad days. We're going to have bad days. And this is what I try to do in my own businesses. It's to lead with empathy, but also just to be a regular person. Like, you know what? I'm having a really bad day today. I am so sorry. Just bear with me. It's not to make excuses. It's just to try to be human. And I really am convinced that makes a big difference. It might sound super simple, but I'm shocked at seeing businesses that don't do this. Discover your real whys. I didn't really share about this before. I just want you to think about this, and I'll share one of my own. Why are you doing what you're doing? If you're a business leader and you don't know why you're actually running your business, how do you expect anybody else to even want to be there or connect into the whole purpose? One of the challenges that we have for younger generations is people want to know why it matters. I think that's a great thing. But if we as business leaders don't even know why it matters, it's going to be hard to get people to get tied into that. So discover your real whys. Why are you really passionate about being in business? And another big one is to give away credit and take responsibility. And what I mean by that is, when you get praises for your company, give it to the employees. Don't try to take that credit for yourself. But when the failures happen, ultimately take those as your own and own them. You're going to see employees that are going to respond to that really strongly. One of the things I want to leave with you guys here is what kind of greater impact can you make in your own business? For me, it's not just about repairing homes. It's about going into a place where there's a crisis, where we can help alleviate some of those situations for people. But it's also for me about how can I actually network with other businesses here so that we as a trades or as a community can help take care of each other. Some business owners aren't going to care about that. They just want to do what they're doing, and that's okay. But I want to try to find people that actually have that kind of a vision. That's going to transform a community. And when people come into Pullman and they're going to be like, what is this place? I've had people, especially during the lab, when we were running this lab, they were coming from all sorts of places. They had just arrived at Pullman and they said, what is happening here? Why are people so nice? That's something that we can be proud of. But we have to work together in order to keep that going. Another thing I just want to mention quickly is self-reflection, and I say this to myself, when I, a safe person, receive feedback, we all get defensive, we get feedback. But there are some people that say they want feedback, but they actually only want to get the feedback that they want to hear. And we know those people. I want to encourage you not to be one of those people. To work hard at receiving feedback, but you have to provide a culture where people feel it's safe to do that. In my business I was sharing overseas, my right-hand guy, I talked to him about this and I said, look, no one is more important than anybody else. And especially in there, they had a very top-down culture where it was the top person, he's the one in charge, everybody else they're just the workers, they don't matter. And I said, we're doing something different. Yes, I'm in charge, but everyone has equal importance here. None of it's gonna work if any one of us bails. Which means that I need to be able to get feedback if I'm not staying true to the values that I wanna have in our company. And there was one day where we were driving down the road and I was watching these guys repair the streets, and because I had worked in the utility department before, I saw that and I was like, they're doing that totally wrong. And the reason why they're doing it that way is job security, because they're gonna have to come back next year and they're gonna have to just redo it again. And he looked at me and he said, that wasn't a very nice thing to say. And that might not sound like a big thing to you, but that was a huge moment for me because he felt like as an employee, he could actually say that to his boss. There was that trust level that had been built on that he could feel like he could actually say that. Because in a different situation there, he would have been fired on the spot. So think about in ways that maybe in your own business, are you receiving feedback? Are you a safe person? If you go and ask one of your employees, am I a safe person? They're probably not gonna tell you whether you are or not. This is something that's gonna take a while to have to figure out. And we could have all sorts of other talks about what that looks like. I just wanna put that in your head. And then also just think about what are your strengths and weaknesses, because those are things that are gonna be influencing your employees and how you can hire new ones, keep the people that you have. I've tried to figure out what my whys are. And I've done a lot of different things over the years, and it keeps coming back to this. This is what I wrote a little while ago. It's bringing hope and restoration to what's been damaged and broken. And so for me personally, it's all about people. And then I live that out through a business or a job that I work at. When I find a place where I can be involved in working with people, helping with people, I've been involved in nonprofits, but even through business, it's about, for me, bringing hope and restoration. So I can work in a field about trying to repair or restore like damaged fields, can work in houses that have been damaged, but ultimately it comes back to being able to bring hope and restoration, to walk in and say like, hey, it's gonna be okay. We can make this better. And that really fuels the passion that I have. And so when I try to find people that I employ, that's the thing that I'm looking for. I want to find people that care about that as well, not just the person that can do the job. Because this is the kind of culture that I want to be able to create for my business, and it will set it apart from other businesses that might be competitors of mine. So I'll just end with that. Been talking a long time, but I just want to know if you guys had any questions.
Have you seen on the American side the resistance from employees to have that or be receptive to that empathy type of leading? The common feedback that I've seen and received has been, this is just a job. I don't want to be a part of the company family type stuff. So I've seen more resistance actually from the especially younger employee side. Have you seen that, or what's been your experience?
I've seen that as well. And so a lot of my experience for that would be when we were running this lab, because there was hundreds of people that came through, so I had a lot of experience like that. And I think just for me, it was the obvious thing was people need a job. They need to work. So to try to expect them more out of them, I don't think that we should force people. We want to find people that want to. But the reality is people need to work. Obviously for me, like I would want people to be at the same level that I am, like, oh, here's the vision, I want to do this, and know that that's not necessarily where people are at. But to try to find people that are doing that. I think also there can be, every situation can be different, so I don't know exactly like the experiences you've had, but people are coming in with all sorts of different experiences, good and bad. And so they may not feel like they can trust a person who may be wanting to lead with empathy. Like, hey, how are you doing today? Because maybe they've been taken advantage of. And they're like, hey, I'm just gonna do my job. Don't even ask me any questions, because they've had experiences where they've been manipulated to do things they didn't wanna do. And so you just have to be sensitive with that. And to be able to let those, what I've done is just let them see it. Let them see it, don't pressure them, and eventually they're gonna be able to see it. And if they don't care at all, then that's okay. And maybe they'll want to leave eventually. But you know when you have it right, when you've had people that give feedback and they're like, I've never worked in a place like this before. And I can say that from like when we worked in the lab, because there were so many people, and I had people that said that. I'm not taking the credit for myself, there was a team of people that really cared about this passionately. But does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes?
I just kind of wanted to piggyback on this a little bit, because sometimes business owners, they feel so much pressure from having to make sure that everything works right and everything, and they don't realize that because they're so stressed out that they kind of dump on their employees. And this kind of goes back with your example of the man who was very controlling and strict in business and very friendly at home. And I'm kind of like that in that when I'm at work, I'm very focused I'm a task-oriented person, I'm always thinking. So very keyed into doing the work and focusing on that. But when I'm off work, I'm a lot more social and friendly and stuff because I'm not thinking about work. I kind of switch off. So I think a lot of business owners, they're so focused on, I got to make sure that I have enough money to pay all the employees, and I have all these responsibilities to take care of. And the employees don't understand that, and the business owner doesn't realize that all that stress that they're dumping on the people below them, and then they get into I have to control everything so everything works right. And so it's everybody on each side, they're not seeing it from the other perspective, and so they can't understand.
Yeah, I definitely know what that whole stress of trying to pay employees and all of that as well. So, one of the things that I've done, not necessarily super well, but what I've been trying to do in this Handyman business is that people that I hire, for them to be able to understand more about what it's like for the business, like how is it run. Not every business wants to do that. I will share details about job costing. Every job that we do, they'll be able to see like how it gets billed out, so that if they see an invoice, they're like, what, I don't get paid that much? But to be able to understand all of the other costs that are involved in order to try to even keep a business alive. And I wish I would have had that when I was younger. That would have helped a lot. And so I've been trying to do that with my employees so that they can understand that like, hey, it's okay for us to talk and chit chat or whatever, but this has to get paid somehow, because at the end of the day, my employees are going to get paid before I will. And that's a challenge. And so I think that's something that's been helpful for me. I think it's been helpful for my employees that I've hired, for them to be able to understand more about that aspect of the business. But the other thing that what you were saying I think is true, like what I'm excited to see about this kind of a group here is for us to be able to share some of those challenges. I feel like we're not the only one out there that's struggling. A couple months ago, Austin Storm talked about like that, it'd be great for us all to be able to share honestly with each other about how our businesses are really doing. Because when people ask us like, how's your business going? You're gonna say, oh, it's great, even though it's not. And you're thinking, I don't know how I'm gonna meet payroll tomorrow. Like you're not gonna tell people that. And that's just the reality, that it's gonna be hard for us to be open and honest unless we have some really trusting relationships with each other. But I think that that's one thing that could be really helpful with this group, is us to be able to find like, how can we support each other in these challenges as being a small business owner. because a lot of our businesses are dependent on what happens with the university or with the farming area. So there's a lot of things that we all are going to experience together, and I think we just need to find ways to support each other.